The goal for today is to get functional carabiners that we can use for product photography for the Kickstarter. We only have 1 day booked for this, and that's probably super overly optimistic. We can do our best, fingers crossed. We do have margin built in at the end of the project. Things will go so much smoother if we can get those functional prototypes today. So I'm gonna get started. Packages are shipping themselves and I'm not doing it. How cool is that?
Hello, it's Scott on my first day as full-time Design the Everything. Apparently I just signed up to be a vlogger as well, so you're gonna have to bear with me as I learn how to do this. So AJ has me shipping right now. We have a few orders. I don't know if I can make this look at my paper. This is the to-do list I have until I finish it. I am new to the camera and I don't know how to turn it off.
The tap in one piece? The tap is not in one piece. The tap broke, but I'm just gonna go ahead and finish out this part because I still have other things to test and those threads aren't going to affect anything. It tried to start that toolpath inside the material. That might be why I broke my tap. Let's try to figure out why that happened. This here is the cause of that little crash. On the fixture, this carabiner is basically flush with the top, but on my cam here, it's a little bit below the surface. I'm not sure why it's like this, but I can just move it up to the top. This first prototype here, not perfect, not terrible. None of the other tools broke, but this slot is a little bit off center. I think that's because of my fixture. My fixture isn't quite positioned where it should be, but I can fix that by tweaking my offsets. The other problem is the carabiner doesn't work. For whatever reason, the arm is too long now. I used the same blank design that I used before, but possibly due to warping because of the off-center cut, it's not in the right place. So we'll have to see what's going on with that. I was able to kind of force it so that it's closed, but you can see kind of the weird shape it's resulted in there. So not quite sure what's going on there. Otherwise, everything's good. So Scott and I made an executive decision.
Yes.
We are not selling the S-shaped carabiners during this Kickstarter.
Yes.
Why, Scott?
I just think that it's too many new products at once, honestly. I think that we can move the S-shaped carabiner into its own Kickstarter.
It also simplifies this Kickstarter from a user perspective. Like, you just have less decisions to make.
Yes, for sure.
And we already have a lot of decisions they have to make.
Yeah, colors and metals.
I just replaced that tap. We're gonna run another prototype. The only change I made on this one, other than fixing that cam error, is I tweaked the work coordinate system, so hopefully those slots are a little bit more center. I'm thinking that'll be the difference we need. It broke again. We only have one of those taps left. This one turned out much better. It actually works as a carabiner now, though we still broke the tap up here in the top hole. I really wish I could explain why that tap is breaking, because we only have one left, and if we break that tap, this whole project gets delayed. So doing some troubleshooting, it looks like there's 3 or 4 completed threads at the top of this hole. The tap hole goes all the way through, and I didn't see any buildup of chips in here, so I don't think it's a chip clearing issue. It seems like it's breaking because there's just too much torque on the end of the tap. It's only breaking when it gets a couple threads in and there's more drag. So I think I need to drill a slightly bigger hole to reduce some of that. Let me check the tap hole size versus the drill I'm using. That may be the cause of our problem. I broke the last tap, so I guess I'm moving on to the scales. This is what the scales look like. There is a scale for the arm and a scale for the spine, and of course it gets one of these on each side. For the Kickstarter, we're definitely just gonna get them laser cut, but for now, for prototyping purposes, we're gonna make them out of sheet stock. Well, that didn't go very well. My super glue came off. Too bad it didn't work that well the first time. So I cleaned up the parts as best I could and I put them together. Now this is literally just super glued together because the holes weren't threaded. I think it's enough to show Scott and see what he thinks. Also, it's only got one scale on the back since it, threw the other half. Okay, so there's lots of things wrong with this. The scales are super glued on because the threaded holes didn't work. Yeah, I know it opens kind of sideways. Be very gentle with it or those will pop off. Also, it's missing a scale.
The scale is much lower.
It's because I super glued them together. I didn't have a good reference.
I see. It feels weird because I carry my regular one around all the time, but I think it's nice. Like it's a little thick, but not. I think it'll be fine in there.
I don't love it yet.
I mean, taking like all the sharp edges off would help a lot.
Yes, it would. The laser cut blanks are slightly undersized from CAD, and the scales are correctly sized, and so they're just a little bit big. I think I need to shrink those down to match reality. What do you think about the non-symmetric curves and stuff?
I would like it to be a little more asymmetrical, I think, actually.
I agree. What if we went to the breadstick option?
Trying to imagine.
I could just go grind it down.
Yeah, sure.
This is the configuration that we affectionately refer to as breadstick, because this version here is straight as opposed to having that little bit of a curve there, which we refer to as macaroni.
Oh, I do like better.
Do you? I'm still not sold. Something, I don't know what it is, but it feels differently proportioned than the original. I might be crazy, but I swear it feels differently proportioned.
This one is a little easier to open. I don't know if that's anything.
I think the flexure shape just changed a little bit and that was enough. Or potentially it's kind of a mental thing. Because the one with the brass is actually noticeably heavier. And that's only half the brass.
It's heavier, but still light.
Yeah, it's probably just the shape of the flexure. It's a little bit different. Which is odd because it's actually smaller, so it should be harder to open.
I mean,
also the walls are thicker, but
I don't know how this would change the scales. It makes it feel a lot more top heavy because it keeps going. This part.
Mm-hmm.
So I think if we were trying to make it like feel the same, you would have to move the latch down.
I'm not worried about it feeling in the hands. Just like it looks like it's a different shape.
Yeah, because I mean you've shoved all the weight over.
What if we made the bottom of the breadstick line up with the bottom of the other scale, and then closed this top scale so that the whole top half is brass or whatever scale the scale becomes?
It wouldn't be perfect, right? It would just like meet in a.
They couldn't match up perfectly, but they could be close together.
I mean, I'm open to that. I would ideally like to see it.
It's kind of supposed to balance out the flexure on the other side, but it's not enough to do so. In a perfect world, we would move the bottom scale, this scale right here, just like down the arm. And, it would start here. Like, it would have to be like this big to give appropriate balance out here. But it can't because of where the clip has to be.
How against are you moving this?
Very.
Then yeah, there's not a solution.
What if we try making it all brass?
I don't know, we can try it.
Alright, I'll make one. We ended up tweaking our carabiner design, so I'm going to switch back to the other palette. And until we get something we're more happy with, we're just going to settle for 3D printed scales. And did I mention that we kind of need to get these carabiners done today? All right, Sky, here's the new design. What do you think?
Oh.
What do you think?
Oh. I definitely like this one more. It's just much more pleasant that it's like all together on this side.
It fixes all of the balance issues that I had with this design.
Also, it's late and I can't unsee the face.
Okay, time to go to bed. Good night. Good morning. Today is now Tuesday, and after thinking and playing with that carabiner yesterday, I have a few small tweaks that we need to make, and then we'll see if we can make it another set of scales. Actually, first I need to make coffee. Let's take a second to talk about some of the considerations around buying a CNC machine when you are something like a product development shop. In 2023, you don't need a CNC machine in order to get parts made. You don't have to be a big company to get parts made. A small company can go to a service like Send Cut Send or Shapeways or Xometry and get parts made. All you need is money. 10 or 15 years ago, no one would take you seriously as a small company, and you basically needed to make those parts yourself. That's not the way the world works anymore. So, is there a reason to still buy a CNC machine? On a per part basis, something like Xometry is a lot more expensive than making it yourself, but you don't have the $60,000 in CNC equipment, and you can get a lot of parts made at Xometry for $60,000. So in 2023, should you buy a mill or should you stick with those online services? And I think the answer is, it depends. I had some design changes that I wanted to test on my carabiner. So I made the changes in CAD, I hit regenerate on my cam, and I hit cycle start on the machine. 10 minutes later, I have a fully functional carabiner out of the actual material that it'll actually be made out of, not just a 3D printed version. I do have scales for this printing on the 3D printer now, but if I had planned ahead, I could have made them on this laser cut. Realistically, my part iteration time is about half an hour, so if we assume 8 hours a day, I can do 16 iterations in one day. If you go through a company like Send Cut Send or Xometry, their part iteration time tends to be around 2 weeks, 2.5 weeks, maybe 3 weeks, which for some businesses and some people is perfectly fine. If you were really good at project management and you had some small prototyping ability like a 3D printer, you could definitely make that work. It wouldn't be difficult to start a product development company in 2023 with just a couple $100s if you went that route. However, I think the constraints of having to wait 2 or 3 weeks per revision are going to force you into making worse parts. If I had to wait 2 or 3 weeks every time I wanted to make a tweak on this, I would make less tweaks and I would end up with a worse product. At the end of the day, my opinion for the way I work is it's worth it to buy a machine. Maybe you don't need this one. Maybe you can get by with a Tormach 440 instead of 1100. But I think you do need to be able to make the prototypes yourself in-house. If you are just getting started and you don't want to lay out the cash, that's also fine. There are so many online services that you can use. Just expect things to take a lot longer, and you need to spend a lot more time in CAD and with 3D printing in order to get a good product. Thank you for attending my TED Talk. Back to machine. So I've been using this little super glue arbor as a fixture. Problem is, I've had some reliability issues with it over the last couple days, and I really need to get these scales done, and I need to make a bunch of them. So I'm going to take this opportunity to make a bigger one of these. That'll give me more surface area to glue on when I'm cutting, and it'll also let me add in some nice features like threaded holes for securing work just for added safety. This pallet here will be our raw stock. We don't have to do too much to it. Basically just add some pinholes, add our little grid, and then add some threaded holes to be able to put screws in.
Okay, and while AJ works on that, I will be working on the first draft of the Kickstarter campaign and looking up inspiration for the visual design elements.
I have good news and I have bad news. The good news is I haven't technically slowed down production yet because we're still waiting on the tap so we can make the final carabiners. The bad news is getting this fixture done has been a mammoth pain. I thought I was being smart by making a fixture that I could reuse on other projects, and I mean, in theory, that was a good idea, but I've just ran into problem after problem after problem on this. I keep breaking, well, that is my problem. I keep breaking tools. I have broken 2 drills and 3 or 4 taps already. This project was supposed to just take like an hour, maybe an hour and a half to get done, but we're in like the 4 or 5 hour mark, and that's just not worth it anymore. So instead of trying to tap all of the holes with my last tap, I'm just going to tap the 6 holes that I need, no more, no less, and that way I can get moving on to production. I don't understand why this has been so hard. I used to never have a problem with tapping holes, but like breaking taps is all I've been doing lately. Anyway, you think it'll make it 4 holes? 6 holes. Think it'll make it 6 holes? It's going. I tried to stop it and it didn't work. The tap's still there. The Is that the tap breaking? It broke on the second hole. Why? There's... Maybe I need a floating tap holder? I shouldn't, but I've never had these issues with tapping before. I don't know what's going on. I'm gonna buy a floating tap holder. In the meantime, these threaded holes are optional, right? I hope so.
But I get up, I always do. I never think, I always do. Never thought I wouldn't jump, oh what a fool. But if I fall, I will get up again.
It's now like 6 o'clock in the evening and this fixture is finally done and I can finally get started on scales. I started this project at like noon thinking it would take me an hour. Now, unfortunately, most of those holes are not tapped. So we are just not going to use the tapped hole feature on this project. We're just gonna do the super glue and tape method with these dowel pins that'll be used for locating the edges. Other than all the threaded holes missing, it is actually a very nice looking feature and I am happy with how it came out, other than that one issue.
Trying to fly 'cause I'm light as a feather. But I get high, I get low at the same time. Feels so right, then I'm wrong, hoping I'll be fine. But I get up, I always do. I never think, I always...
It is the next day now and I have been putting off running these scales. Mostly because I'm kind of afraid that they're not gonna work, especially since I can't put the screws in the fixture for that extra stability. So we're just working off the super glue again, which caused some problems last time. The machining yesterday really didn't go well, and I just hope it goes better today. I don't know if I can handle another day of just repeated failures like I ran into yesterday. Anyway, fingers crossed. I'm pretty sure this isn't where it's supposed to be drilling. Yeah, wrong work coordinate system. That's supposed to be, you know, the one we engraved onto the pallet. Something actually worked like it was supposed to. I just had to run over here and e-stop the machine. We started losing our adherence. Fortunately, nothing's broken, but I think I'm done with this for today. I think my problem is actually this coolant with this tape. I think if I move to the powder coat tape that Saunders Machine Works says to use, I think I would be fine. But because I'm using this painter's tape, it soaks in the coolant. I also could do it with an air blast. I'm just not comfortable cutting titanium without the flooded coolant. I mean, it can be done without a problem, but I just don't want to be testing more variables. I have speeds and feeds that I know work, and so I want to stick with those. The downside is occasionally I lose my part. So at this point, I'm going to swap back to the Carabiner fixture and see if we can get it to tap those holes without breaking the taps. My new form tap should be here any minute now, and yesterday I did get in some regular taps that I can break before I try the form taps. Just an interesting note in case anybody's curious, I checked that scrap I took off the mill. The point of failure was definitely the tape adhesive on this plate, not the tape adhesive against itself or the tape on the titanium. I swear, my issue is always the adhesive on the aluminum. I am cleaning the aluminum. I just don't know if I'm doing a bad job cleaning the aluminum or I'm doing the wrong thing. I'm using acetone, which maybe the acetone doesn't clean the aluminum very well, or maybe I have coolant particles embedded in it or something. I don't know what's going on, but whatever I'm doing, it's not working. It's always the aluminum that releases. I would love to make one of these little super glue arbors out of brass, but that would just be prohibitively expensive. I suppose I could do steel. I don't know. For some reason, the aluminum just doesn't seem sticky. Anyway, time to break some taps. All right, next test. of tapping these carabiners. I've made a couple changes. One, I've given the machine more height before it actually enters the hole. That'll give the spindle more time to get to the right speed, just in case the control loop is a little bit off. I am also using a plug tap instead of a bottoming tap. Plug taps are theoretically better at starting holes, and maybe it'll solve these issues. I'm also not using coolant this time. I am going to be using a traditional tapping oil. So the machine will come to the hole, it'll pause, I'll put tapping oil, and then hit go, and it'll do the tap. If all of these things don't work, then I will try a pecking cycle, and maybe that'll do it. Well, I think I got farther that time. So that worked better. The tap got almost all the way through the hole. So now I'm going to try almost the exact same thing, except I'm going to try peck tapping, which is the tap goes into the hole and then out of the hole, and then in the hole and out of the hole. I've never done that before, and it seems like a good way to add more error to the situation. Unfortunately, I am out of those plug taps, so I'm moving back to these bottoming taps. I would rather not change two variables at a time, but I don't have an option at this point. Just kidding, my post doesn't support peck tapping. Just kidding about that, just kidding. My post now has support for tapping with chip breaking. I'm testing my post modifications by just running it without a part there. If I break a tap with it empty, I'm gonna be so mad. Oh, yeah, I mean, it's doing the pecking thing. Looky there. This is gonna take a whole lot longer, but if it works, I don't care. All good, let's try this thing for real. Guess it's time to try the form taps. Form tap is loaded up. Let's see how this one works. I broke the drill? I haven't broken a single drill in this whole process. It made it through exactly one hole. Will it survive? I didn't hear a snapping sound. I'm not sure if I could have heard it over the coolant though. Did we make it? I'm afraid to check. I'm gonna let it get all the holes first. My heart is beating way faster than it should be. Is the tap there? No. The tap is broken. It broke on the first hole. We broke both the drill and the tap on this one. I knew the drill broke, but it finished at least the first hole first, so I figured I would try tapping the first hole. The drill broke on the third hole, the tap broke on the first hole. So, in the scrap bin that one goes. I missed. I may be in desperation mode now. I just need something that I can use for product photography. It doesn't need to be perfect yet. We can figure out the rest of the manufacturing stuff later. These are all solvable problems. Worst case scenario, we just outsource this to somebody with a better machine if we need to for production. What I'm gonna do is I'm going to drill an oversized hole for the tap. So when it goes to tap that hole, it is not going to have as much engagement between the threads and the metal. That will mean that we get weaker threads. But that doesn't matter here. This isn't going to a customer. No one's gonna ever see this or touch it besides me and Scott. The threads will be functional, they just won't quite be as strong. They'll be easier to strip out. Drilling an oversized hole, if this breaks a tap, I'm at the end of my rope. But this will work. This has to work. This can't not work. If this doesn't work, it means there's something wrong with my machine. Or me. Something wrong with me. There could be something wrong with me. There is something wrong with me. It's late and I'm very tired. It's about to do it. Well, that didn't sound good. That broke the tap? How?